Just one sec. There we go. That familiar voice. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Social Enterprise 201. The next step after Social Enterprise 101. It's a little bit more detailed than the first one. This is, as you probably know, brought to you by the Community Sector Network of PEI. So they've put together this a great program for you, not just limited to this webinar, but a full incubator that's coming along. Which right now in Atlantic Canada, it's probably like the fullest, like complete set of services for social enterprise supports that we've got going. So it's great that PEI is now leading the way. Amir already gave a bit of an intro. Just a bit about me. Just the organizational affiliations. Probably the most interesting one is the bottom one. That I'm the chief hired hand at our little sheep farm, Pheasant Ridge Farm. The rest of the stuff is also interesting, but the last one keeps my feet on the ground. So the session goal today is to provide a concise intro to the practice and field of social enterprise, and it's been around as a self-aware movement now for about 30 years ish, maybe a little less than that, and there's been a lot of twists and turns, and if you're not like right in it, it's easy to kind of lose track of what's going on, and I'll do my best to bring you up to speed. And we're going to cover kind of 5 kind of clusters of things, kind of a framing and defining the field, key challenges and requirements within it, some success strategies that I've gathered over the years. I'll talk about funding and support that's available, and then of course anything else you want to talk about. And what I suggest is, as I'm presenting, I'm going to present, and then we'll do kind of a Q&A at the end. And so if you have a question, when it kind of comes up for you, just drop it in the chat, and so it's not lost. And then when I'm done presenting, we'll come back to them, and we'll go through the questions that you've got. Just while we're just kind of get grounded a little bit, get a sense of who's in the room, I would ask that you just in the chat, just put your name, your organization, and a bit about your experience with social enterprise, and just put that in the chat. And just for your own reference, you can see who's here. If it's not really apparent to you from the video feed, you can see who's in the room. Unfortunately, while I'm sharing my screen, I can't see the chat. So, but you can, I think. So I'll just give you a few minutes to, or not even that, a minute or so to drop your name, organization, and experience with social enterprise in the chat. And again, that's just for your reference. And as you're doing that, I'm actually gonna roll on here. So starting with framing the field, I'm going to look at 4 things. So the perennial question of what's the definition of social enterprise. So I'll take a swing at that and provide some examples. I'll talk about the hybrid nature of social enterprise, where it fits on the spectrum of enterprise, and then try to dispel some common misconceptions. So the definition that I like the most, because I had a hand in defining it partly, so that's
sorry, are you going to share your screen?
Oh, am I not sharing the screen?
Yeah, I can't see them yet.
Sorry. It looks great to me. Hang on one second. I'm sorry. I was so caught up with the getting the recording going that I forgot to share my screen. This will make a lot more sense to you. There we go. Christine, is my screen?
I can see it now, yes.
Awesome.
Thanks.
All right.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Awesome. So, so this definition is from the Social Enterprise Council of Canada. I've been on the council now for about 15 years. Has 3 key components. So there are social enterprises or businesses that sell goods or services in the marketplace, like any business. but they have a social, cultural, and or environmental purpose, and they reinvest the majority of their profits or surplus to maximize their social mission. So that's kind of the standard definition, and versions of that have been adopted across the country, including with the Government of Canada. The one addition that I would make is that, from my perspective, social enterprises are also collectively owned and operated. And so that means that when we're talking social, or when I'm talking social enterprise, I'm really talking nonprofit or cooperatives, and not privately owned companies. Privately owned companies that operate with a social purpose have their own kind of space, and I'll talk a bit about that. But when I'm talking social enterprise, it has that fourth piece, is an important one from my perspective. So some examples from the island, the Reach Foundation, an organization I've done some work with. So they are a charity operating just outside of Charlottetown. They operate 3 different social enterprises: a bike shop, a soap shop, and a custom embroidery shop. They would fit within the kind of the largest single category of social enterprise that I would call work integration social enterprises. So they provide training and transitional employment to people who face barriers to employment. And so they're a really great example of that kind of social enterprise. Another one, the Victoria Playhouse. Arts-based social enterprises often get missed in the discussion because they've been around longer than any of the other social enterprises. But there are a lot of nonprofit cultural organizations like the Victoria Playhouse. In this case, they feature Canadian playwrights, employ local talent, and to paying customers who come to see the productions. Interesting one that's near and dear to my heart is the Grower Station. It's located in Charlottetown. You may be familiar with it. And it's really about connecting local growers with local customers, principally restaurants and institutional buyers. And so they're really about kind of strengthening and supporting the local food system and supporting local food sovereignty. All 3 of these organizations are nonprofits, so they're collectively owned, and I think are just kind of great examples right on the. And there, I could go through a long list of others, but just to give you a grounded sense of, like, these would all certainly meet the definitional requirements of a social enterprise. Next, I want to just talk a bit about the hybrid nature of social enterprises, and this will be a theme that'll come up throughout the presentation. But the first space is around kind of needs and wants, and how social enterprises kind of fit within that. And so nonprofits, who are kind of the parents of most social enterprises, really focus on community needs. So the need for affordable housing, accessible food, belonging, healthcare. These are core needs that people need. On the business side of things, they're concerned with what are people willing to pay for? What do they want? What kind of food? What kind of housing? And social enterprise comes up the middle and addresses community needs through the provision, through meeting customer wants. And so they are a hybrid at the most core basis, the core of their business model. They are a hybrid. And this is a detailed slide. I'll send this. There's going to be the slides and a few other handouts that are going to go out to you. So don't sweat trying to read all the details here. But what I've got here on the screen is a thing called the Social Business Model Canvas. And what it does better than anything else is illustrate the hybrid nature of a social enterprise. So you'll see these kind of 9 components: customer segments, value propositions, revenue streams, customer relationships, customer channels, activities, partners, resources, and cost structure, kind of the core of a business model for any business. But within a social enterprise, they've got potentially 2 considerations for each of those 9. So in this case, all the yellow are kind of the social considerations for a construction. So this is for a construction social enterprise. So an enterprise that would train and employ people to work in the construction industry, often people who are facing barriers to employment in that industry. So the yellow is about kind of the social aspects, the programming aspects, and the blue are the considerations that any construction company would have to consider as they go through planning their business. So you see kind of in black and white here, or in yellow and blue, that hybrid nature that cuts across the entire business model for a social enterprise. So it's a nice illustration of the hybrid nature of a social enterprise. And I'll share this. This is a PDF with you after the presentation. So there's often this kind of talk about like, so how does social enterprise relate to all the other things that are going on? And I like kind of placing it on this thing I call a continuum of enterprise, where at the far left, you've got traditional nonprofits and charities that use a social strategy to create a social purpose. And on the right side, you've got traditional for-profits that use a business strategy for a primarily financial purpose to pay the owners and shareholders. And down the middle, you've got this hybrid. You've got this using a business strategy to achieve a social purpose, whether that's a nonprofit social enterprise or a social purpose business. So I'm going to overlay that with some examples to give you a sense of things. That if you look on the left side, you see I've pulled some examples here. I've tried to use PEI examples where I can. So Boys and Girls Club of Prince County, the Centerpoint Church, nonprofit organizations have a programs that they offer to achieve a social purpose, not operating as businesses. On the right side, you see good companies like Vessey's and Murphy's, private companies that are operating to achieve profitability through a business strategy. As you move toward the center from either side, you're moving toward this hybrid nature. So if you go from the left inward, you get things like cause marketing and business partnerships, where you see the Campbell soup cans there. There's the pink ribbon where a portion of every sale goes to breast cancer research, and the red program, same deal. They have a line of red branded products that support charities. So it's a partnership between a private company and a charity or a nonprofit. As you kind of move one more step in, you get into nonprofit social enterprises like the Grower Station and the Victoria Playhouse. As you move from the right in, you've got companies like, so Made with Local, not a PEI company, but started by a PEI girl, Sheena Russell. Very much environment, social, and governance, also often referred to as corporate social responsibility and business sustainability, very much baked into the Made with Local business model. Same with Upstreet Brewing. They are a certified B Corp, which means they have committed to the high standards of business sustainability. So moving in that direction. And then you got in the center a company like mine, Social Enterprise Solutions, where my company exists to achieve a social purpose, which is to empower social enterprises to make change in local communities. So that's the reason I do this. So you get a sense of like where things fit and how they relate to each other. So you'll see these terms pop up from in other contexts, and just kind of this gives you a sense of how to relate them to each other. Finally, in this section, I'd like to talk through a few common misconceptions that you may hear that'll get thrown around as kind of black and white facts or opinion, or when in fact they're just really opinions. You may hear someone say that social enterprise is illegal, that nonprofits and charities can't operate businesses. And while it's true that depending on how you do it, you could operate a business within a charity or a nonprofit that would be offside Revenue Canada regulations or provincial regulations. But as long as you operate it in the way that I will show you, in terms of the success strategies, it can be done entirely within the bounds of what is legal. Kind of a related one is that social enterprises, you'll hear like social enterprises compete unfairly with private companies because they get government money or donations. And as I'll explain later on, that's really opposite. They level the playing field by getting what I would call social revenue, like grants and donations, to offset their legitimate social costs so that they can compete fairly with private companies. So that second one's really a made up concern. Third one, social enterprise will replace our need for grants and fundraising. Social enterprises are at their heart small businesses. The average profit margin, so money left over after expenses for a small business in Canada, is around 10%. So if you're operating a social enterprise that is generating, say, $100,000 in sales, you might, if everything works, walk away with $10,000 in profit that you can put toward other mission critical activities of your nonprofit. But that 10,000 is probably not enough to, almost certainly not enough to replace the grants and donations and other forms of fund development that you do. So it can be an important contributor to your bottom line, but it's not going to replace the need for grants and fundraising. And finally, the idea that customers will buy from us because of our mission. That's the thing. Like, that's what they're buying. And I will say that it's kind of the icing on your value proposition cake. Like, it's, if all other things being equal, if you're providing similar quality, similar price, similar convenience, all the things that paying customers are looking for, and you have a social mission wrapped around that, it may cause them to go swing your way, but they're not going to buy just because of your mission. They'll do it once, and if your product isn't comparable to the private sector alternatives, they won't come back. So you have to meet the private companies on their own terms, and then it can become a differentiator for you, but not the primary reason. So kind of moving out of the kind of framing the field and moving into what the challenges and requirements are of social enterprise. I'm going to break it out, and you'll see I'll do this really for the rest of the presentation, between things that you'll see for any business and things that are unique to social enterprise. So some key challenges that what every business faces, including social enterprises, are, getting and keeping great customers and employees, consistently producing products and services, getting paid enough and on time, financing your growth. Like, that's social enterprises are not shielded from that. They have to do all the same things that every business have to do. In addition to that, they have their own unique challenges that private companies don't have. Things like mission drift, where if you're running a successful social enterprise, it is quite common that paying customers will ask for products or ask for them in a way that may pull you away from the purpose that you're running that enterprise for and your larger organizational purpose. And when it happens, it'll feel good because your paying customers are going to come to you with money saying, we want these other things. And it'll be really easy to say yes. But in doing that, it can pull you away from the reason that you're doing it, which is, to employ people who face barriers, or to support the local food system, or affordable housing. Like, I've personally experienced this, where in the moment it feels great because you just made a big sale, but that big sale has pulled you away from your mission. So you have to be very clear about what your purpose is so that doesn't happen. Social enterprises, for every challenge that they face, they'll have two different, often competing perspectives and requirements. So, when that customer comes back and says, well, I don't want this product, but I want this new product that you could offer. It's like, well, I could do that and be good for business, but that's not something that my youth in recovery can actually produce. So I'm going to have paid staff do that. It's taking me away from the training opportunities. Sorry, can't do that, but I can do this. So you're constantly kind of switching and navigating between those two perspectives for everything that you're doing. There are, although this gets overblown, there are, navigating provincial and federal regulations. So federal regulations, primarily the Income Tax Act, provincial regulations, primarily the Companies Act and PEI. There's not a lot of direction provided within the Companies Act, which is good. Leaves you a lot of room to maneuver as a nonprofit in PEI. If you're a charity, you're subject to the Income Tax Act, and they're pretty clear about the guideposts of what's legitimate, what you can do. I could do a whole webinar about that, but just suffice to say that as long as you operate your social enterprise in a way that is linked, so very connected to your mission, and that the enterprise is subordinate to the larger functioning of your organization, Revenue Canada will see that as a related business, and will kind of let you carry on. Even within, if in the kind of the worst case scenario, if it becomes larger, if it really is successful, you can spin it off as a private company that's owned by the charity, and that's completely legitimate activity. And so it kind of is your relief valve if you ever had a super successful social enterprise as a charity that you needed to, that was becoming bigger than the charity itself. Other challenges, shifting from relying on a few big funders to also having many small customers. And that puts a burden on your accounting system. So billing and processing payments and stuff it may be a domain that your organization is not familiar with, but needs to be able to respond to. And finally, funding and financing. Nonprofit social enterprises, for the most part, have available to them any funding that's available to a small business is also available to a nonprofit social enterprise. With one exception, the Business Development Bank of Canada, or the BDC, don't provide funding to nonprofit social enterprises. Everybody else does. They may not know that, and you may have to educate them. You may not know that, and so you need to, find all those that kind of thing here. But you can pull from the small business financing menu pretty much the same as any private company. In addition, there is financing specifically for nonprofit social enterprise. I'll walk you through both sets, but it's important to know that you've got kind of two different streams of funding that a private company doesn't have. Okay, skills and capacities. Again, you have to be good at what every small business does, but you also have to be good at what every nonprofit program requires. And you have to be able to understand in the moment what's required and navigate between them and address the social and enterprise aspects of every challenge. So it's that hybrid nature really defines the unique requirements of being a successful social enterprise manager. Is that you have to be a really great small business manager and a great program manager, and keep those kind of two things, like different sides of your brain, in play whenever you're making a decision. So that's kind of all the things that might make things hard about social enterprise. For the rest of the presentation, I'm going to talk about things that make it easy, and things that can help you be successful. So starting with success strategies, broken out into kind of marketing, operations, financial, and high-level strategy. And this is 4 lists of 3. So marketing, selling to your local public sector and corporate anchor institutions. So think about the city, the municipality, the local Holland College, UPEI, schools, large institutions that buy everything. And many of them are now giving priority to buying from social enterprises. And the same can be said, not to quite the same extent, but there are good corporate citizens that are doing the same thing. And so there's this whole field that's come about called social procurement. And nonprofit social enterprises can get to the front of the line with these anchor institutions in a way that private sector companies can't. And so it's really something to be aware of. And Buy Social Canada, which I'll reference later on in the presentation, that's their mission, is to help you become effective in social procurement. So that's something to be very aware of, and it's really quite unique to nonprofit social enterprise. Likewise, as a nonprofit social enterprise, you have a community of stakeholders that you already have, many of whom could become paying customers or investors or supporters. And you have an opportunity to appropriately convert those stakeholders to those customers, investors, supporters. It can be done inappropriately as well, but it can be done very, very effectively. I worked with a group that ran a gift shop featuring Native American gifts in Minnesota, and they were supported by the St. Paul and Area Council of Churches. So the biggest churches throughout the city, combined congregation of, I think, 30,000 people. It was just huge. And they had never gone out to those members of the churches as potential customers. And we found a way to appropriately approach each church and find out, what was okay and what wasn't. And they went from having, a few hundred customers to 30,000 and a few customers. So, and it was transformative for them. So it's an example to think through. And finally, competing on the basis of value and quality, not price or your mission. Now, again, mission can be that kind of final differentiator, but it's not the core of your value proposition. You need to be able to offer the same product quality at the same comparable price as your private sector competitors, and then mission kicks in. Trying to undercut price just leaves money on the table that you shouldn't leave on the table. That could be very useful for you and your other activities. And it also does open you up to charges of unfair competition by private companies that will say, look, they're getting government money and they're undercutting on price. That's not right. So you can avoid that just by pricing competitively. On the operations side, these are not things that are unique to social enterprise, but are good opportunities for social enterprise to maximize your impact, to add additional impacts beyond your kind of stated social purpose. So things like paying a fair wage and being an employer of choice, reducing your environmental footprint wherever possible, and buying local whenever you can, like being a good company. This kind of stuff, kind of internal processes stuff, often doesn't get talked about in social enterprise. They tend to focus on the high level corporate, purpose of the organization, and don't look at the internal workings of it. And by doing that, miss opportunities to have other supporting impacts. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind as you're planning and operating your enterprise. On the finance side of things, be prepared to explore funding from both traditional business sources and social enterprise sources. Move your banking to a local financial institution, a credit union if possible. It's good for the community, and it expands your value, your social value proposition. And as I've already kind of referenced, you want to make sure that you're leveling the playing field with your private sector competitors by securing social revenue, grants, donations, other forms of fund development to offset your legitimate social costs. And that's especially the case if you're operating in a social enterprise that is training and employing people who face barriers to employment. Those types of work integration social enterprises, more than any other, are burdened by legitimate social costs that need to be offset by social revenue. And finally, under strategy, kind of three things to keep in mind: that you have one ultimate bottom line, which is your mission or your impact that you're seeking, but profitability is an essential supporting goal. Like, you have to be able to operate a viable enterprise for it to continue on and to create its impact. But that's not, making money is not the reason you're starting a social enterprise. You're doing it to further your mission in a sustainable way. The next one is, dreaming big. I'll say this to every entrepreneur, social entrepreneur or otherwise: dream big, but start small and lean and grow as you're able. I can't think of a successful business operating out there that started business with its fully realized vision. They all started out of their basement, their kitchen, their garage, on evenings and weekends, as small as they possibly could, while still providing a compelling value proposition, and then responded to the market and kind of grew in a way that was responsive to the market. It can be very tempting if you get significant funding, and this often can be the case with social enterprises, that a major foundation or a government department will come in and say, great, we're going to give you X $100,000 of money to do this great thing that we really buy your vision. And the temptation is to start bigger than you really need to. And if you make a small mistake with a large initial step, it can be deadly. Versus you can make big mistakes with operating a small minimum viable version of your enterprise, and it's just a learning experience, as it should be. So too much funding too soon can be deadly for any business, and including social enterprises, because they get you away from starting small and lean. And finally, if you've been operating your social enterprise and you're bumping up against a big opportunity, perhaps a social procurement opportunity, like you're going to do a contract with the city to provide services or products that's much, much bigger than what you've been able to do previously. You don't need to do it on your own. You can do it through partnering, through a joint venture, a partnership, or a producer cooperative with another social enterprise or with a private company. That's a common strategy in social procurement, where nonprofits will partner with larger private companies and come together to go after large procurement contracts. So it's a good strategy. And finally, funding and support. So again, you'll see this kind of the two sides of the equation. So the menu for any business in Atlantic Canada looks more or less like this. You've got community business development corporations, of which there are 3 in PEI, rurally based, and provide debt financing. And they also run a program called the Consultant Advisory Services Program, which provides 75% dollars up to $5,000 contributions to hire a consultant to do a feasibility study, a business plan, a marketing plan, branding strategy, anything you might need to help move your social enterprise along. Not a huge amount of money, but it's very responsive. They turn around requests very quickly inside of a month. And if you're located within the catchment of one of these 3 CBDCs, and you can there's a map for them. You'll see them on cbdc.ca. It's a great thing. So it's you want to become familiar with your local CBDC if you are in the area of one of them. ACOA has something called the Business Development Program, a big kind of their marquee funding program. Probably not something you'd start out with, but if you've been operating a social enterprise for a long time and you're looking to make that big jump, could be a good option for you. The province has its own startup and early stage program for small businesses. If you go to that link, and again, I'll give you the handout so you'll have all these links. You won't see any mention of social enterprise, but you don't see any mention saying they're excluded either. So I would always err on the side of assuming that you're eligible than not. And then finally, there is small business loans insurance that's available to any business, including social enterprises. And what that does, it provides insurance on a loan that you might need to do something to grow the enterprise. And the insurance provides that guarantee if things go sideways, and reduces the requirement, maybe doesn't eliminate it, but reduces the requirement for someone within the nonprofit to provide some kind of personal guarantee on that loan. So that loan insurance can be really valuable. In Nova Scotia, the Nova Scotia Co-op Council has its own loan insurance program for social enterprises, and they'll cover 100% up to $50,000 loans, and it's operated through all the credit unions in Nova Scotia. So you can, if you apply to the Nova Scotia Co-op Council and they approve you, you can then go to your credit union and say, right, I've got this. We've been approved by the Nova Scotia Co-op Council. We've got a approval for coverage for $50,000, and the credit union now sees you as a zero risk loan customer, and will provide the very best terms you can imagine. I have a client in Halifax who's got a $50,000 loan at prime interest, flexible repayment schedule, so interest only for the first year. They just did everything they could possibly do because there's no risk. If it doesn't work out, the Nova Scotia Co-op Council covers 100% of the loan. So that small business loan insurance works much the same way. So you get a whole other menu of funding as a nonprofit social enterprise that private companies don't. And here's the kind of the hit list, starting with this Community Center Network of PEIs program, which we don't have this in Nova Scotia. So you're uniquely served in PEI in a way that we aren't in Nova Scotia. The Interweave Social Enterprise Coaching program that's offered through the Makeway Foundation, previously offered through McConnell, but now offered through Makeway, is a great program, offers support up to $25,000. for specialist expertise to help you grow your enterprise. ACOA has a program called the Innovative Communities Fund. It's like the sister program to the Business Development Program, but specifically for nonprofits, for large-scale infrastructure funding. So it can be very, very effective, with the provision that if anyone who's applied to ACOA knows it takes a significant amount of time to get an approval, but it can be worth the wait. Catherine Donnelly Foundation, based out of Ontario. If you align with their programmatic interests, they will provide support, sometimes significant support for social enterprise. The Social Finance Fund is a federally funded, when it was originally launched, close to $1 billion. So now I think down to 700 million, still a huge, unfathomably large number, that is being distributed out across the country through a fairly complicated and quite opaque process, network of organizations, but it is being rolled out finally. Again, I could do a whole webinar just with the Social Finance Fund, and would be happy to answer questions, within this webinar or after. I also have a colleague, Justin Sweeney, out of New Brunswick, who's a specialist in social finance and could give you detailed information. One of the organizations that's involved in the Social Finance Fund is Tapestry Community Capital. They specialize in community bonds. So if you were going to do a large infrastructure campaign, like new building or equipment for your social enterprise, they could help you put together a local bond offering that would help finance that, in addition to or in place of a traditional capital campaign. And then finally, crowdfunding wasn't designed specifically for a social enterprise, but is uniquely suited to social enterprise, in that social enterprises have a compelling story that lend themselves well to crowdfunding. And so the link that I've provided there is a great intro to the practice of crowdfunding. It's surprisingly easy, and provided that you do it right. Some important networks. Locally, of course, is the network, Community Center Network of PEI. Nationally, I would say the most effective network is BiSocial Canada. Like, I'm a member of the Social Enterprise Council of Canada, but we're more of a think tank than a network. But BiSocial Canada has member social enterprises all across the country, and are just a great source of support. And then globally, the Social Enterprise World Forum operates, runs a conference all over the world, conferences all over the world every year. The next one's going to be in Taipei, Taiwan. But they have a whole host of other resources that they've brought out in addition to their annual forum. It's all available at the link I provided there. So it's like the de facto global network for social enterprise. So you want to be familiar with all three of those. One resource that you should be really familiar with, which has just come out, is the new guide to social enterprise, published by BiSocial Canada. It's about 65 pages long, filled with current, very great case studies, lots of good information, lots of links to other information, completely free. It's a downloadable PDF that you can get at that link that's listed there. And I think that's it. So that's my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then we're going to see what questions you have got, and we'll use the balance of our time to kind of explore those things. So what did we come up with here?
We don't have any questions in the chat that went throughout the presentation, so I can just leave it open to people who want to ask questions now, either in the chat or you can unmute. I believe you have that capability.
Yep. I did that.
I believe Ains has a question. They have their hands raised.
Hey, thank you for that. I'm just curious, if so like you used examples like the Reach Foundation and Victoria Playhouse. With those organizations or nonprofits that run a social enterprise, do they ever is their funding ever impacted? So like if a funder knows that they're running a social enterprise, you know, will they not get selected for funding because of that?
I mean, that's the risk that gets discussed often. My experience is often opposite. Like the good funders, what they see is that there's a leverage factor. That if they give you $10,000, you'll turn that into 20,000 by through your social enterprise, because that social enterprise can go out and secure other funding, and it will generate revenue on its own. So that there's a leverage factor with nonprofits that have social enterprises that may not be there with nonprofits that don't have social enterprise. I'm not aware of any of my clients having lost kind of a legacy funding from like foundations or government because of their social enterprise activity. I've heard many examples of them getting funding because of their social enterprise activity. That wasn't related to their social enterprise. They just see it as an important part of the mix, and they see them as a progressive organization that's worthy of support. Other questions?
I have one. I'm putting my real hand up. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Hi. Yeah, I was saying my name is Brenda, and I'm a member of the Community Sector Network, and I really appreciate this opportunity here. This is the first time I'm joining one of the live events, and so I'm really into social enterprises we've been doing it as an organization. So our organization's Cause Roots Community Empowerment Projects, and we're kind of new in PI, and we're working on a cool project that will be coming out soon, but it's about bringing all community together through events. And our organization has historically kind of done social enterprise work through what we call projects versus being a registered social enterprise. And we're going to be stepping it up a notch. And I'm just wondering, because it just occurred to me in this, you know how as a sole entrepreneur or proper, you can earn so much money before you're actually registered as a business. Is that something that's true to a not-for-profit, just testing the waters before they make a big commitment with a certain amount of revenue coming from?
Yeah. So like in a private company, you know, you've got that a $30,000 threshold where beyond that you have to start charging HST. And I think the same applies to, I think it's agnostic as to the legal structure. So if you get into something where you're charging more than $30,000, I think it's specific to HST. You know, the need to beyond that, like there's no when you say register a social enterprise, what do you mean?
So to have a business number for a social enterprise, like within the province or federally, whichever it might be. Can you be running a social enterprise kind of gig when you're under a certain threshold, I guess, without being registered?
Yeah. So most social enterprises will operate at least initially under the umbrella of a parent nonprofit organization. So the registered entity is that nonprofit, and the social enterprise is just part of that nonprofit. So if your organization is already kind of set up or registered as a nonprofit organization, that's the organization of note, and the social enterprise is just part of that larger nonprofit. So is your organization, is the organization generally a registered, like is this
it's a registered incorporated for 10 years, and it does events, and it does agri-food apprentice program. So like money is generated, but that money is put right into the project immediately. Yeah. So there hasn't been like a conscious decision to become we've had 12 projects and none of them have become a social enterprise, although they work like as if, but now we're looking at doing one in PEI. So that this came up was perfect, and it's grassroots and it's meeting a need for people who are from away that come
Yep.
here, such as myself, to belong here and to be empowered and be contributing to community in a way that helps them to be part of the community.
Yeah.
So, in a short.
So yeah, so most nonprofit social enterprises start life out as a project. Like they
Right.
don't, like no one knows that it's going to turn into something. So it kind of starts as like a one-off, and then it kind of goes from there. The question of whether to, so your experience is kind of very typical. The question of whether to register the social enterprise separately, it's a question of to what extent is it aligned with or integral to your nonprofit's larger mission? If it's just part of what you do, that's a good check mark. The second check mark would be a matter of scale. If that enterprise was still, relative to the parent organization, quite small, and there's no hard and fast number here, but something like under 25% of the budget of relative to the larger organization, you can keep it within the kind of the umbrella of the parent organization. The moment it gets beyond that, it starts getting like, well, okay, it's starting to feel like more like its own thing than just a program or a project or an enterprise of the parent organization. So it becomes a decision to make at that point. But if you're just starting out and it's aligned with your mission, I wouldn't worry about spinning it off as a separate entity, unless you had private investors that said, we want to invest in this, and we can only invest if it's a private company. So you need to incorporate it as a private corporation, and we're going to sell shares. And
Right.
if that's like the only way it can get launched, then there's a decision to make, I guess. But otherwise, no. I mean, most social enterprises kind of start off life, kind of in the nonprofit's garage, so to speak. Like it's
Like a project, like we've done.
just exactly like you've done. So what you've done is very, very typical for how most things get started, and like most small businesses get started. Like they're not incorporated separately. They're just like something that people do as a side hustle until it turns into something. And then when it turns into something, then you have a decision to make. But until you reach that point, I would say keep it simple and keep it under your existing organization.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Other questions?
Okay, I don't think there are any other questions for Andy. So if anything comes up, is it okay if they contact you through the information that you're going to provide?
Absolutely. Yeah. My full contact information is on the last slide that I didn't show. But yeah, I'll and the way I do is it's like the first call, second call option. It's always like, don't worry about like, does the clock start ticking? Like, I'm happy to take a call and answer questions like Brenda just had, for example. It can be, it can be email, it can be phone calls, Zoom calls, whatever you want to do. Absolutely.
Okay.
I'd also like to mention that this presentation will be available on our YouTube channel, and I will be sending out the link to that tomorrow, next couple of days, as well as the slides that Annie's going to provide to us.
Perfect. Hi, Christine.
All right. So thanks for your time today, Andy. And those of you that are interested in the in-person workshop series that we'll be holding in the new year, and Andy will be one of the facilitators, you can get in touch with me or with Christine, and our information is available on the website.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great day.